So in the last video, I introduced to you the fluent-data library for JavaScript. I talked about installing it and went through some of the documentation. Here in this video, we're actually going to get started using it. In particular, we're going to use it with its dataset functionalities. The dataset has a lot of features available. In addition to just simple structures like mapping and filtering it, you can actually join in a way that you would find very difficult in vanilla JavaScript. Even in other libraries and in other languages where you think you can work with a join pretty well, like imagine the link library in .NET. You can do a join in it, but even in something as simple as a left join can be very difficult and painful. You can probably feel me on that one if you're experienced with it. Here in fluent-data, it's actually quite pleasant, syntactically speaking. And it's not a loop join under the hood, it's a hash join. If you're more on the statistical side of things, you might be interested in the ability to standardize your variables. You can do a regression with a data set. You can reduce your dimensions as you would with a factor analysis or a principal components analysis. Today, we're just going to go with the basics, though. We're going to do none of that stuff. That'll be for a future video. We're just going to show you how to log to the console, do a basic mapping and filtering, and how to work with it as a variable. So let's actually go to the wiki and steal this array here so that you don't have to see me type it. Instantiate a data set, just use the library as a function. And pass in the array. Purchases is now a data set. To see the contents, probably best to use the log method defined on it. By default, it'll output to the console. Simple enough, right? If you're on the client, it'll output to the console on the client. If you actually wanted to output into an HTML element, you can do that. Just pass in a query selector. That'll output to the inner HTML of some element with that ID. We're not on the client, so let's just pass null. The parameter is a caption. There you go. Third parameter can be one of two things. You can either round using this third parameter, or you can do some sort of mapping, like if you wanted to calculate a column. Let's do the round first. To really push the point of the rounding, let's make this a non-integer, and then of course all our times are already non-integers. Passing in 0.1 to round to the tenths. That might be a little different than what you're used to. You might be expecting to put in a 1 for one decimal place. But here we round to the nearest multiplier. Multiplier being 0.1. And as you can see, time is now to the nearest tenth, and as is rating. Why would we do it that way? Well, imagine you wanted to do the nearest quarter instead. It's much easier to represent that. If you wanted to map, such as doing a calculated column. Let's say we just wanted the customer ID column. And shortened name. And let's say we wanted to do a multiplier, a calculated column, let's say against books. Just multiply it by 2. What we've done here is gotten a subset of the columns and outputted a calculated version of books. This did not change the data set. It's just the display. The actual contents of the data set as we saw it before. Imagine we wanted to do this. Let's just do this. What do you think that might do? The spread operator, if you're not familiar with it, just outputs all of the properties of P into this new object we're creating. P is the row. I like to use P to identify the row because purchase starts with P. You can use whatever parameter name you want. It's already outputting a books property, but I'm adding one and setting it to undefined. Well, that's going to just get rid of the books property. In normal JavaScript, you might, depending on the area you're working with, it might just get rid of the property, but very often it might keep the property. You'll have a books property in the output, but it will be set to undefined. In fluent-data, it just gets rid of the property entirely. So just think about what we've done here. It's analogous to saying, if you were in SQL, it's analogous to saying select star except for books. I mean, don't you wish you could do that in SQL? If you wanted to not include a column, star is no longer available to you. You have to output everything except for that column. Same thing with JavaScript. fluent-data makes that a little bit easier. If you wanted to do something analogous to a select star except rename a column, just do this. We renamed, pretty much cloned books into a new name, and then getting rid of the old books property. Everything else is the same. So you can imagine if you had 50 columns instead of just the 5 here, that this would be much more pleasant to do. Again, this is not changing the actual data set. If you wanted to do that, don't use log, use map. Oop. And then let's still log it to get the output. Now we've actually changed the contents. Let's do a filter. Let's say we don't want ratings that are too low. Let's get rid of ratings below 50. No, we want to just include ratings above 50. That's the way I should be expressing that. And I don't see rating 31, which I think is the only one below 50. Simple enough. Nothing too impressive too far, right? But we're just getting started with the basics. Now, how would you actually work with purchases? Let's put this into a variable. Let's actually look at result. So, oh, I logged it. Sorry. Get rid of the log. Still shouldn't be different. That should still be the same, actually. Shouldn't be. Oh, okay. So now look at the data set and look at the data. It's a generator. And sometimes it won't always be a generator. Sometimes it'll be an actual array. But then even if it was, you'd have to do something like result.data. You wouldn't want to do that, right? And you want to guarantee that you're going to get a certain structure. So it's not recommended you work with result.data. It's recommended instead that you do get. Get will output your results to an array that you can work with. Now, it's an array of objects. If map is your last call, you have a shortcut available to you. You can just do get and pass the mapper to get. Makes it look a little bit better, a little more elegant. I think I'm going to stop it here. This filter and the mapping might not look too impressive now, but when you see it in tandem with our next function, group, which in itself is interesting, but in combination with some of these others, it'll be quite powerful. So I'll see you at the next video.